In discussing the laws of brachas, one truly classic case is cheesecake, both vis-a-vis the bracha rishona and the bracha achrona. So let's get started. Regarding the bracha rishona, we learned that under the rules of ikar v'tafel, a mezonot ingredient is almost always considered primary, even when it is not the majority. Now, a typical cheesecake is made mainly of cheese with a relatively thick crust at the bottom. And since the whole cake is baked together, it is considered as one food. And although the crust is clearly not the majority, it does add flavor. So thus, as a mezonot food, it is the ikar. And even though you eat the cake primarily for its cheese component, the bracha on the cheesecake will follow the crust and usually will be mezonot. However, if the cheesecake was baked with a thin crust whose sole purpose is to hold the cake together rather than to add flavor, then the bracha on that cheesecake would be shehakol. Okay, now let's talk about the bracha achrona. Okay, let's say that you ate exactly 1 kazait measure of cheesecake. In other words, what you wound up consuming was 20% of a kazait of mizonot, of crust, and 80% of a kazait of cheese filling. And here we have the big question. Can you say the bracha al hamichya if you didn't actually eat a full kazait of mizonot? And of course, this is assuming that the crust was the ikar, in which case the initial bracha you said was mizonot, and now you want to know if you could say al hamichya, combining the cheese and the crust together for your bracha achrona. Now, according to one opinion, well, like we said, since the crust is the ikar, the cheese combines with the crust, and it does obligate an al hamichya. But according to another opinion, in order to say al hamichya, you would need to eat an actual kazait of mizonot crust within the 3 to 4 minute time frame of kedei achilas pras. This means that if the mezonot crust, for example, was 1/5, 20% of the cake's total volume, then in order to say al hamichya, you would need to eat 5 kazait measures within 3 to 4 minutes. Because if you eat 5 kazait measures of cheesecake, and each kazait is 1/5 crust, mezonot, so 5 kazait measures will bring you to a full kazait of crust, of mezonot. Otherwise, if you eat less than that within 3 to 4 minutes, then according to this opinion, your bracha achrona would be borei nefashot. So, getting back to our original case, where you ate exactly 1 kazait of cheesecake, in that case, the crust goes down in status to combine with the cheese and obligate a borei nefashot. So, since there's a difference of opinion what to do here, if you need a full kazait of actual mezonot crust, or if the mezonot crust can combine with the cheese to form the kazait, since there's a difference of opinion, the best solution really is to eat enough cake that contains a full kazait of mezonot and then say al hamichya. Now a caveat. According to the opinion we mentioned earlier, that even when you ate just 1 kazait of cheesecake, but since the crust is the ikar, the cheese combines with the crust to obligate an al hamichya, according to that opinion, this applies only when the ingredients are baked together. If you had, for example, a ready-made crust, and then you just spooned some cheese filling into it without ever baking them together, then according to all opinions, if you wanted to say al hamichya, you would need to eat a kazait of actual crust. Okay, now I want to take this one level deeper, so stick with me. Now let's say, for example, that you ate a piece of cheesecake that was exactly 1 kazait in size. Now again, let's say it was 20% crust, 80% cheese. So based on what we discussed, your bracha achrona will be borei nefashot, and that covers as well the mizonot. But now imagine that you decide now you want to eat some crackers, and you eat, let's say, just enough crackers to complete the kazait of mizonot, right? You have 20% of a kazait that you had eaten with your cheesecake, and now let's say you eat 80% of a kazait of crackers. So together you have 1 full kazait of mizonot, in which case the crackers and the crust could combine together and you would say ala michya on that mizonot. Keeping in mind, however, that the crackers would have had to have been eaten within 3 to 4 minutes of your having eaten the cheesecake in order to combine. That's the time frame of kedei achilat pras that we've discussed many times. Now let's change the case just slightly. Let's say that you ate some cheesecake and there wasn't an actual kazait of crust that was eaten, so you don't say ala michya, you're just saying borei nefashot, and you go ahead and say your after bracha of borei nefashot, and then you go ahead and eat a few crackers. And these crackers are enough that having combined with the previous mizonot crust, it could have formed an entire kazait of mizonot. So the question is, do the crackers combine with the crust that you had eaten previously to obligate an ala michya? Now in this case it appears no, because you had already said borei nefashot, right? And that covered the crust as well. And given all of that, the eating session basically has terminated, and the mizonot that you ate previously with your cheesecake has already been covered and now cannot combine with the crackers that are eaten after having said the borei nefashot. Okay, you got all that? I know it sounds a little complicated, but that's what the laws of brachas are all about. Review the class material, and if you have any additional questions, email us or ask your local rabbi.